Playtime. Hi, everybody. I hope you can see me because I have no idea if you're there. I am just going to wait for a minute and see if anybody logs on, because I think that people have to log on to be able to hear me talk. Actually, maybe I should just start introducing, and then people on the playback won't have to listen to the stupid log on. Okay, coronavirus tip, just start. Hi, welcome to our talkback with Dr. Michele Tishy, educational psychologist and founder of the HOEP Initiative. I'm MM DeVoe, and I'm the founder of Parentis, a nonprofit whose mission it is to help writers stay on creative track after they start a family. If you are a writer who is also a parent, we would like to invite you to have a look at our website at parentis.org for inspiration and interviews and lots of resources to help you finish your current writing project. Ever since the pandemic quarantined New York City, where our headquarters are located, we have been running all of our programs online. So on our homepage at parentis.org, you will find ways to sign up for our acclaimed literary salons and our accountability meetups, and guidelines for a writing fellowship that is exclusive to new parents that opens for submissions every year in March. Also, due to the COVID pandemic, we took the parent writer residency database that we had begun in late 2018 with seed funds from the Sustainable Arts Foundation, and we launched the website before the database was entirely finished. We have added a brand new forum and even a sign-up sheet where writer parents can post writing-related side gigs for others to use as a reference when they're seeking editors, teachers, sensitivity readers, and other freelance help. That website is writerparentannex.com, and we invite you to explore it. And if you have a writing side gig, we invite you to add yourself to it if you are a writer who is also a parent. And now I would like to bring on Dr. Michele Tishy, so I will introduce her. Dr. Michele Tishy earned her doctorate in educational psychology with an emphasis on social and developmental psychology from the University of Minnesota. She has been involved in holistic education special interest group at the American Educational Research Association for the past 19 years. In addition to her social justice work, Dr. Tishy has lectured on whole child education, innovating educational systems, and parental support systems at conferences and symposia across the United States and Canada during these past 2 decades, and she has also been featured on dozens of panels, including this one. She trains teachers in mindfulness. She trains parents and educators in methods grounded in developmentally appropriate practice. She teaches and writes about heart-centered, nonviolent communication and secure attachment, and she has even won awards for her independent research. Recently, she developed and founded the HOEP Initiative, the Heart of Educational Psychology, HOEP, H-O-E-P, not E-P. It is a breakthrough program for parents that guides them step by step how to create an ideal educational and social emotional environment in which to guide their children while working from home. Since all school is currently homeschool, it is nice to talk to someone who has been thinking about these issues for longer than just the 2 months that we have all been in quarantine. Plus, she has a 6-year-old and a 16-year-old, so she's not just talking from her diploma. We are very honored and very pleased to welcome to our screen and to your homes, Dr. Michele Tishy. Michele, if you could talk a little bit about the HOEP Initiative.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I feel very welcomed. So I was inspired because of the pandemic and our current circumstances to really put my professional and personal wisdom together and create the Heart of Educational Psychology, which is my attempt at a breakthrough program for parents on how we can improve educational and social emotional well-being for our children and ourselves. And I'm planning to teach people who join the HOEP Initiative how to use the power of presence with their children. I'll help you create, as Milda alluded to, ideal educational and social emotional environments to guide your children while working from home. And I will also share with you ways to shift to a more mindful and heart-centered space with your children so that you can spend less time being stressed out and more time enjoying them and getting our work done and doing that joyfully.
Yay. Okay, let's jump right into questions. I know that some people are having troubles logging on, and I am desperately sorry about that. And I'm like, part of my brain is currently in their hearts because I know how it feels to not be able to log on to something. I was trying to log on to a cooking show with my son last night, and we were not able to do it at the same time, and it's very stressful. So hopefully these people will be able to log on, and if not, hopefully they'll be able to share a recording of the event. But question number one is from Jolene, who lives in the Midwest, and her son is 7 and in first grade. Lately, he has been having huge meltdowns, not tantrums, but crying jags, when he is told that it is time to do work. He has always loved school, and the work is not hard. It's easy work, scavenger hunts, writing paragraphs. It is not every time. Jolene wants to know how to respond and redirect. The behavior makes her feel really irritated, so she tends to just walk away and leave it for a day so that it doesn't end up in a fight, but she would like to address the underlying issue. So could you identify for us, please, Michele, whether this behavior is problematic, quote unquote, and what Jolene can do to help her son get his work done?
So I'm going to separate out a couple different variables as a scientist would in this scenario. So first of all, we have a 7-year-old. Second of all, we have a child who doesn't struggle in school normally. And third of all, we are all experiencing trauma on one level or another right now. And whether our children consciously understand what's going on right now, this is a systemically traumatic experience. And because of that, I would say, first, we need to help him feel like he's being validated in how he's feeling. So start to the best of your ability, coming back to your own heart center, to your own space of calm. Whatever you need to do to get there, do that first, and then greet him with love and kindness and validation. It may be that he's just sick of it. He may be bored. He may be frustrated. He may be grieving all the stress around him, and really just helping at his level. He's 7 years old. He's not old enough to have long, profound conversations with you the way a teenager might about how much this sucks. But he's feeling big feelings. And just like we would with a toddler who we're trying to help not melt down, we need to meet them with our calmness. Because if we escalate or completely ignore, then all that does is makes them feel invalidated and lost. And so my prediction would be that the more we can greet these types of experiences with loving kindness, the more likely we are to help them move through it. And a little self-disclosure here, I have a 6-year-old little boy who loves school and hates this online learning stuff. And so he and I have moments like this fairly regularly, and we negotiate and renegotiate. And for him now, it's like, how fast can I get all this done? Because then I have the freedom to do my stuff. And some days it's like, I don't want to look at the screen because that makes me miss my teacher. And so we really have to find ways to connect with them more authentically, because they're going to give us wisdom into what the solutions are.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, I'm so glad we have you on. This is so great. Okay, question 2 comes from Caroline. She has 2 daughters. The 4th grader manages her own distance learning and reads a lot and is generally self-sufficient, but the kindergartner needs guidance to do her work. Caroline is under a book contract and wants to know how to organize her time better so that she's not in a state of constantly feeling torn between work and children. So I sort of broadened this out a little bit as well, because there are really big questions here that I think a lot of our viewers have problems. One is, how much time away from kids is too much time away from kids? Like when you're really into your writing, really into your work, like, is it bad? And then how do you deal with the guilt of any time away from your kids? Because that often makes us less productive when we're feeling guilty. And then we need more time to actually finish the work that we've not done when we were sitting in front of our screens feeling guilty. Help us.
They're a multifaceted question here, right? So first, I will speak again from personal about the kindergarten thing. Kindergartners are not designed for this type of learning. So with a kindergartner, we really need to know what the priorities are in terms of what they need to get done for that day, for that week, for that hour. And I find, and I've been like interacting with my son's peers, parents, the more we can be proactive in terms of knowing ahead of time what they need to get done and scaffold them a little bit so that we can help them with the stuff that they're not going to be able to do by themselves, and really make them feel supported in the stuff that feels scared for them to do alone, then we're often able to free ourselves up to have our work time. And again, I'll use a personal example. I had to tutor someone at a specific time today, and that was a live Zoom call with another human being. Well, I didn't want to be juggling or feeling guilty during that time period. So I made sure yesterday that I knew exactly what my son Kieran needed to get done today, so that when we got up, we had breakfast, we did that stuff, and then I was like, look, you've got these things, which is like watch a couple of videos and play a game on the computer, which was on PBS Kids. I was like, you got that. You like doing that stuff alone. So I made it really exciting and fun. And so when mommy stepped away after working with him for an hour and a half, he was like, oh, I got this. And so different children respond differently in terms of that. But kindergarten, preschool age through first graders, kindergarten is the centerpiece of that. They're needing a lot more support than most of us who are full-time working adults in any fields are really we're not used to having that intensity of having to balance what our children need while we're trying to meet deadlines or show up on Zoom calls or classes. And so it's going to be a little negotiating and a whole lot of pre-planning on our part as the adults.
So let me just jump in, because you kind of slowed down a little from the Wi-Fi thing. Don't worry about that. It's so normal.
Okay.
But I wanted to clarify, you said up until about first grade was where we really have to have the scaffolding and sort of know in advance and set in. What happens between when did, give us some stages?
Sure. So those of you with infants and toddlers are in a different conversation, but if you're interested, feel free to message me. That's a whole different world, and that's
I have a couple of questions for later for that.
Okay. So we'll deal with those later. Preschool, kindergarten, and first grade for sure are still part of this kind of, we like imagination, we like to learn through play. We need adults to be there to help us feel safe in our learning environments. We're not ready for autonomous, independent learning, whether we're in a classroom or at home trying to do this learning. Our brains just aren't ready to scaffold ourselves. Somewhere between 7 and 8 years old, that shifts, and children actually start gaining the skills for independent, autonomous learning. Not that younger kids don't do independent learning. It's just not as focused and academic as what we think about in school. It's more like, I'm going to do a science experiment and look at me, I'm going to dump water from this container to this container. Well, that's independent learning, but it's not something that someone else, AKA an adult, said, you must do X, Y, and Z in this order. So that's an important stage where we shift from the more imaginative, free-form, I'm a curious, creative child to I can actually follow systematic directions. And that happens around 7 or 8. So depending on grade levels and your specific child, that could be first or second grade. From second grade through upper elementary school, that's kind of a golden era where if the child is doing pretty well with school stuff, they can master a lot of autonomy, they have a lot of initiative capability. And that can continue through middle school age. But when we start getting into pre-adolescence, early puberty hormone stuff, the game changes again. And then we need a different type of support from our parents because it may be the end of the world that you have to do an assignment. And that's really what middle school teachers deal with. And most of us as parents who have either gone through that stage or are currently living that stage understand that the emotional and hormonal changes at that age can create crises of a multitude of levels. And so at that age, we're really talking about making sure that their social and emotional needs and their physiologic needs are being met in order to allow them to access their capacity for autonomous and independent work. Because if they're dysregulated, which the stress of this current situation is causing a lot of kids and adults to become dysregulated and they're emotionally volatile, they're going to have a lot harder time doing their schoolwork independently.
Great.
And then later, the older we get in adolescence, theoretically, the more mature we are in our capacities to juggle variables. But I think older adolescents just, they miss their friends, they miss their normal vibe, they're more interested in their peers than us. So it's really about making sure our expectations are clear and we're still respecting them as, maturing young people.
I have good questions about teenagers later. So the next question I have from viewers is from Devin, who lives in Arizona. And I love this one because I get caught doing this all the time. Devin says, how do I help my kid who is age 5 not accidentally make others feel bad about how they are handling COVID? For example, he was playing in our backyard and neighbor kids who are his friends were playing in the alley. Their 5-year-old asked my son to come and play with them. And my son said, I can't play with you because I don't want to catch coronavirus. Well, while that is true in general, it made me wince because our neighbors have no symptoms and I don't want them to think that we're judging them or for my son to accidentally offend someone. Advice, please. And I will add that this question is way bigger than just kids because I feel that way when other moms suggest play dates that I don't quite feel comfortable with, like picnicking together in larger groups, for example. Mm-hmm. So without judging other people for their choices, what is the best way to maneuver this awkwardness, both for the kid and for the parent, please?
So first, I'll start with the 5-year-old dynamic. Like, this is going back to my early elementary and preschool age. This is a unique time in the world for them, not just because of the situation of the pandemic, but because they often blurt things out that would not be socially acceptable to the rest of us. Certainly my son has done things like this, and my 16-year-old daughter's like, so part of that piece is more complicated by the developmental stage that we were talking about. So with that 5-year-old, you may need to be a little more cognizant of the language you're using around that kind of stuff so that you can socially model language that would be less offensive. So perhaps introducing something like, my parents' rules about playing with other people right now are really strict because of the pandemic or COVID or whatever language works for the child, but really scaffolding that so that the child is hearing that rather than, oh my gosh, I don't want my child playing in the alley because they might get the coronavirus. And so that may require a little more mindful implanting of different language. more broadly, this is what we're going to be dealing with over the next year of our lives. No matter when the lockdowns and reopening of states happen, we are going to have to be navigating some pretty complicated issues around boundaries and ourselves and our children and what's acceptable and what's not. And I think it really requires us to come at this with as much compassion, both for ourselves and for others, so that we can communicate our boundaries without offending other people. I cringe when I go to a store, and in Florida, it's no longer mandated to wear a mask in public.
Wow.
And I get really nervous about that. And even though social distancing is mandated, masks aren't. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to be in the store right now when all these crazy people are running around without masks. But am I telling people, oh, you're all crazy? No, I'm saying, okay, well, I can take a step and choose to not be in the store right now. I can choose to stay as far away from people as possible while I'm shopping, which is usually the route I take, or I can say something to the store manager or something. In terms of like the picnic concept, I think it's okay to communicate with other parents and friends that right now my family is choosing to be more conservative about the way that we socially interact, because we are just not ready to take risks.
Super. Okay, now I have a question that is, we're going to switch gears a little bit. I have a question from an educator. Michele says, I understand that parents are working from home or stressed about having lost their jobs. I am also working from home and I have a family. I have students who don't get out of bed until 2 p.m. They are emailing me after midnight and turning in work late. I am consistently working from 7 a.m. to midnight daily. How do I maintain some level of meaning in education while not acting like a hard ass? How do I maintain balance when my administrators are reminding me to maintain a high level of intellectual work while the kids are not maintaining a consistent schedule? I am grading gently and very mindful of the inequities that exist.
So professionally, this is a rather complicated question. And I don't know the context of her school, but what I've seen as best practices is having due dates that are not super rigid, so that if a middle schooler or a high schooler does their work at 3 o'clock in the morning consistently, but still turns it in before the end of the next day, they don't get points taken off. And allowing for more flexibility in that, rather than flexibility in your expectations and standards for the work itself, feels like a much better direction to take. Now, I don't know, some administrators may be much more rigid. You must have X, Y, and Z in within this 24-hour period. And in that case, I would do my best to communicate with my students on my own time and on my own terms, that due to the way that the principal or other administrators are requiring things to be processed, that you have to deduct points if it's not handed in within that 8-hour day. I think, only if you feel like you can handle working the 7 a.m. to midnight should you consistently be doing that. Because in the scheme of things, I teach college students and I'm monitoring a 16-year-old and a 6-year-old. My 16-year-old does her schoolwork between 3 o'clock in the afternoon and midnight. But luckily, her teachers have this is what's due this week deadlines, and we knew that ahead of time. And so as long as she gets stuff done and shows up to her Zoom meetings, she still gets full credit. Whereas my 6-year-old, because of the way the kindergarten teachers handled things, has to check in on Google Classroom by 3 o'clock every day. And luckily, he's a morning bird, and so we do his schoolwork right away in the morning, and he's done by 11 or 12 o'clock. And so from a parent perspective and an educator perspective, I think it's a matter of figuring out what your boundaries are and working within the rigidity of your administrators. I don't see any need to lower our expectations, but maybe be more flexible about time.
Cool. Awesome. This is really fun. I'm really having a good time. Okay, so here's one from Heather. She has siblings that are 4 and 10. 10-year-old is hard to get on Zoom call. The 10-year-old is hard to get on Zoom calls for school. But then they do, and they're fine. But then the 4-year-old feels left out. Okay, so everyone is on the computer, including her brother and everybody. So how do you deal with a young child who is feeling left out and pushed away while you or their sibling has to be on the computer? So how do you explain to the little kid that the parents and the other kids have to be on the computer?
Let's find fun, playful things that they are willing and able to do independently and make that a big deal. I mean, with a 4-year-old, this is the pre-kindergarten, preschool age. They're going to feel a little bit abandoned in this crazy moments, but the more we can give them real quality time when we or their sibling are not on the computer, where they feel like they're being connected with, they're being seen, they're being heard. And guess what? You get to do some cool stuff, whatever that is for that child, while we are all of us on these computers.
Can I ask you, how long can a preschooler be alone? Like how much can we expect from time? like what, is this 20 minutes good, or can they do an hour if it's not a TV show? Like what?
That gets a lot more complicated because it's going to depend on the child, and it's going to depend on your comfort level with things like screen time, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're okay with having PBS Kids running in the background and giving them access to a whole bunch of their toys simultaneously without freaking out about the mess that's going to be made, 40 minutes to an hour might actually happen with the 4-year-olds.
Not every day.
Not every day, though.
Right. Every once in a while, you might be able to.
Yeah, you can probably pull off an hour, as long as they know for sure that they're safe, they know where their big people are, and they have maybe a glass of water bottle near them, and they're okay with the bathroom by themselves, right? Because at that age, we're still dealing with basic bodily function issues.
No, that's true.
And so, if there's ways to stagger so that one person is a little more available, while other people are locked down in meetings, that helps. So, for example, with Kieran, who's 6, not 4, we always make sure that either my daughter, my husband, or I is on call for him if all of us are trying to do computer work right now. That doesn't mean the person who's on call can't be doing work. It just means that they have to be staying at a space where they're not as deeply immersed. And I know as a writer, especially, that can be a challenge. So really negotiating those variables with others in your life, so that sometimes it's okay for a 10-year-old, or in my case, a 16-year-old, to be the person on call during that hour.
Yeah. I can already hear all the psychic vibes from all the single parents right now.
Oh, I know.
How hard, how like the extra degree of how much harder it is. And yeah. Okay, moving to teenagers. So Jane asks, how do you deal with the very normal but spiky hormonal rage of teenagers when no one is able to physically leave the space? How much leeway should they get for their meltdowns? How often is a meltdown okay, and what can anyone do about it?
It's normal. It's normal. And so I say give a lot of leeway, but let's work on social and emotional learning skills that they probably learned in preschool and kindergarten. Let's work on, we validate that you're feeling like this, but we're all stuck here together. This may be an invitation to start having family meetings, even if you've never had them before. And really, make sure that the teenager is not just holding themselves up and then having outbursts that are destructive to themselves and other people, but really sit down and say, this is what I see going on with you, and I want to hear from you what's actually going on. And if
How
they're,
does that not feel like a lecture to them?
well, if
Like when you do a meeting and they're outnumbered, for example.
So if we had 2 adults and a teenager, we would want this to be mutual sharing. The model comes out of something called restorative justice practices.
Right.
And so in a restorative circle, we all have a voice at the table. And it's kind of like the talking stick model in traditional Native American culture. And so you literally can have a rock or a stick that you pass around so that everyone has a voice at the table. And they know that they have an equal voice to their adults. In families with more children, this is very empowering because the younger kids will have the opportunity to see that things can be handled without it being some huge conflict.
Cool.
But it may take a little lead time to introduce family meetings if you've never done it before.
Yeah, because we have so much time now, we'll just read up on no. Okay, I have another team question here from Nikki. When the schools say that the grades won't count or everything will be pass fail, how do you not lose the momentum of striving for achievement? How do you teach a kid that striving actually matters in a world where it doesn't seem to matter at all?
So now I'm going to be full-on educational psychologist. You all are not going to like what I'm about to say. Grades are not the primary motivator in a good world. People need to learn how to be intrinsically motivated. Most of us do not get where we are because someone held a stick and told us we had to do this or else. Yes, deadlines help you when you're writing. Yes, scaffolding and stuff like that helps. But in the scheme of things, whether or not you get a grade or pass fail, what really matters is the love of learning and the striving for knowledge. And unfortunately, all of us became parents in an era where standardized tests and grades became hyper important. But if you think about your own best learning moments in your life, most of us don't think about the A. You think about some amazing experience that you had that made you fall in love with writing or fall in love with research or fall in love with whatever drives you as a human being. And this I could talk way too long about, but this is a shift from our current educational paradigm, which unfortunately came out of some really bad federal policy, to shift to a thriving 21st century model of education that honors the fact that we are unique individuals who all have our own inner genius. And the goal of education needs to be to help us have the skills and the tools to reach our own personal capacity, not as a cliche, but really reach our capacity.
Okay, so I am a true believer of this. Like, I just want to tell you, like, I love what you said, but how the schools are grade motivated. Like, you can't get to the next level without getting the grades. So how do you balance the fact that you're a true believer with the fact that this is the way the world is? How do you motivate? Like,
So I know I have some educators on here too, as well as parents. So I'm going to say part of what I'm doing is planting the seeds in pre-service teachers and being willing to be a brave parent who says, I don't care that your school got an A from the state. I want to know what you're doing to help every child in this school thrive. Because right now, parents are presenting obstacle for people who are actually looking at the research and the new neuroscience on this and realizing that the outdated education system we are using, which was created as an agrarian industrial model, does not work in the 21st century. And the longer we hang on to this outdated model, the more likely we are to have one of the worst failures in education in the United States. Because globally, they got the message. They've read our research because most of the best education research comes out of the US. And they've shifted their paradigms and they're actually thriving a lot more than we are in terms of their educational models. And so part of this is being brave enough to actually stand for what we know is right and not cave into the status quo. because it's a paradigm shift. It's not something that's going to change while all the parents are standing on the side saying, oh, we like the status quo and let's keep everything the way it is. That's why the system stayed the way it is. So we can be the change we want to see.
Okay. Now we're going to babies. I have a baby question. Sarah wants to know, is there a way to recharge one's creativity when one is truly overtired? Like the infant didn't sleep for the last 3 weeks tired.
This is complicated, and this goes in, I don't know parenting style or way of being, but I'll share with you that I wrote my dissertation with a newborn in arms, but I chose to be very hands-on. Like I wore my daughter while writing my dissertation a lot of the time. And I really like baby wearing is something that was very useful to me. I know that doesn't work for everyone. Not everyone can write while breastfeeding a baby. Like that worked for me. So there's that aspect of things, because there are ways to negotiate getting your work done and having a baby in arms. And then there's the no one's sleeping, and like recharging your batteries at that point is let's figure out ways to sleep when the baby's sleeping, because then over the course of a week or two, you'll be recharged enough to get back to it. But they're different, right? Because one is very personal decisions.
That makes sense. You put on the air mask for yourself first.
Yes.
Then you can move on.
Yes.
It won't be an infant forever, right? Eventually.
No. They grow out of this stage of life.
Okay. Let's see. Catherine from California. Resilience is a buzzword that we hear a lot of. We are supposed to step back and allow our kids to fail in the small things so they can be unafraid of failing the big things. What in the world does that actually mean? What is a small thing? It hurts parents to see their kids not do well, small or large. We feel their pain. How can we make it not about us?
That's a beautiful question. And I love talking about resilience. Resilience comes from letting there be natural consequences to making mistakes so that we can actually learn from them. So a little thing in a very physical skill is your child falling on their bike and skinning their knees. If we protect them in a bubble from that experience, they're not going to develop resilience as a bike rider. And so if we translate that to the rest of life and education, it's, asking them to try hard things educationally, knowing that they may fail, but not do it in a high stakes fashion. Too much of our education system for the last 20 years has been everything's high stakes and everything's overly important. Well, it might be okay to try a really hard workshop or class, or try a topic that's challenging for you when you're in an English literature class and you want to write about the hardest piece of literature offered as an option. You might screw it up, but if you have a good teacher and parents to support you, they can help you after the fact go, wow, that's not really what I saw in Chaucer's writing. Like, we can reevaluate. So those are the types of things. And, if teachers are aligned with parents about facilitating resilience, they're going to build in something I call mastery learning into the way they teach, which means that if you screw up your first draft, you're going to get feedback, and then you're going to have the chance to revise and resubmit, right? Writers understand this. I try to make sure all my future teachers understand this too, because that's a very resilient model. Yeah. Get rejected, right? Get rejected the first time you
send it out again. Exactly. Yes. Let me just grab, there's somebody just asked a question on the chat. So Joanna, I have a 3-year-old and I feel like I have no time to write. Meanwhile, the 3-year-old is playing creatively all day. Any ideas for how to make playtime with my kid fuel my creativity in a way that is fulfilling and productive? I think she's got it, man.
Yeah, no. So I think this is a really fun question because it may mean that you need to tap into your inner child and try to really immerse yourself for brief periods of time in your 3-year-old's world, enough to allow yourself to have that spark come back. Because if your 3-year-old's playing peacefully and joyfully and you engage with them for half an hour and then you go write for an hour, that might be the most productive writing of your day. I find that sometimes I take computer screen breaks from my work to go play with my 6-year-old because that reminds me why I do everything I do in life. And that reminds me of simpler ways to find joy and peace and all of those yummy feelings. And, you know, if your 3-year-old doesn't play well alone, that's challenging, especially if you're a single parent. But if you can, and you can write within a reasonable distance of a 3-year-old, you can probably get stuff done while they're playing. I set myself up when my daughter, who's now 16, was little, and I was just out of grad school, where her play area was right next to my computer. And so she could play and know where mommy was at all times. And I was a single mom at the time. And I was close by, but I didn't have to be physically in her play space. So I got writing and grading done, and she got to play, and I knew I would pause if she needed me.
Great. Okay, here's one. Here's a now one. As the world transforms with new policies, new procedures, and new facts about this virus and how it spreads, when is the right time to talk to kids about it? It doesn't say what age. For example, is it better to wait and see if schools stay closed this fall, or is it better to start being open to the possibility right away as soon as the adult hears it?
I would actually say, with a few exceptions, more transparency is better. I thought my 6-year-old had no clue what was going on. Our schools closed during our spring break, so it was like, no big deal. It shouldn't be something we need to talk about. He surprised me. And at his friend's birthday party, which was right before the pandemic happened, but right after they started talking about it nationally and New York had shut down, he was like, Mommy, my birthday party might get canceled. There's a bad virus. And I was like, wow, like, okay. Everything I say to parents normally and teachers, I just had validated by my own son, because he like called me on the carpet. And so he brought it to my attention. We were very open. He hated doing online schooling this whole time, but we figured it out. And he's aware that hopefully he'll be able to play with his friends soon, but that hasn't happened yet. I think, you know, kindergarten is not too early to have those conversations. You just have to do it on their terms. With older kids, older than kindergarten, I think the more honest but heart-centered we can be, the better. So help really your child understand that you understand that talking about this may be hard. This may be very difficult because we're in a state of the unknown. But except for like really little children below the age of 4 or 5, it may be too early to talk to them about it, because if they don't already have awareness of what's going on, there's no reason to complicate their lives. And then children who have complicated cognitive issues going on, so children with severe autism spectrum disorder, cognitive disabilities, who maybe don't really understand what's going on right now, that's not necessarily my top priority in terms of recommended. I can't talk. Conversations.
I have a follow-up that's from a different person. What is the best way to deal with one crushing disappointment after another? Your school will have a Zoom test on your birthday. There will be no birthday sleepover. Your favorite pizza place closed down. We can't go to the theater even though we bought the tickets last year. And you have to take a COVID test that day because it's the only day they could schedule it. When are kids able to handle disappointment, and how can parents help them accept the inevitable sadness of life?
What a nice question. So that day sucked, and maybe we should do some journaling about it, some primal screaming about it. I mean, that's like a whole lot of
That's a lot of bad in one day.
A lot of this sucked. And so giving that person the opportunity to fully emote in whatever way they need to, and then find ways to create moments of joy that can happen the next day or a week from now. Because I think we can find ways, even like right now, Amazon Prime is offering movies that would otherwise be in the movie theaters. You have to pay for them. But if you can afford it, maybe letting your child who had a horrible, terrible, no good day for their birthday pick a movie that costs money that normally you would get to go to in the movie theater, and actually creating a family movie night or something like that might be an alternative.
Yeah, we have that Netflix share or something.
Yeah, right.
There's two.
And there's like, if you weren't able to go to a concert or a Broadway play, there's streaming services now available for those things.
Really cool.
Yeah. And so finding ways for that specific person, that specific child, to have something that replaces it.
I want to grab one of these chat questions that are over here. So Deborah says, I haven't read this in advance, so I'm just going to read it cold. I have a 14-year-old who does not like to leave the house. It doesn't bother him if I go out and go to the grocery store, but if he goes out, he is going to die. Other than to tell him that he won't, we just need to be smart. How do I help him realize that you can safely social distance outside? Wants to go to grandma's, not play dates. This is like a legit, just go outside, get some air. How do you get terrified children out of the house?
Help them breathe. And help them feel safe within their own little bubble. So it may be like making sure that they have a mask they like, and that they feel spatially like they know what 6 to 10 feet looks like and feels like, and really help them to kind of create some of their own boundaries around this. We talked earlier about us creating boundaries and 5-year-olds setting boundaries a little too harshly. But in this case, it's really about empowering the child and validating that this is a really scary time. And it sounds like there may be some underlying anxiety going on here. So we also want to address that. Breathing techniques, things that help the child come back to their centers, so that they can feel like they have some control over this scary situation. I think, it may take a little more time investment, because terror is kind of like panic. They're very similar emotions. They are not things that just go away because the grown-ups told you to not feel them. They're things that we actually have to hold space for and create a little bit of calming energy around, and then introduce some alternative ways of looking at things.
I have 2 questions now that are a little bit about writers, writers. One is, give us some tips to boost our own creativity when we are closed in with the kids. We usually get about 20 minutes to an hour at best. How can we write with only that amount of time, particularly those of us who are writing novels? So how can we boost our own creativity? Like, how do we get into this space of luscious fairyland?
So yes, I will address this. First, I'm going to tell you that in the world of academic mamas, there's a whole movement towards writing a dissertation, which is a relatively robust document, in 15 minutes at a time. So hyper scheduling, as crazy as that may sound in the midst of all of this, may be your best solution. Because if you can set yourself up with micro goals, you may actually be able to get more accomplished. Because for me, creatively, and as a hobby, I do creative writing as well. Like, I relax by writing poetry and stuff. I'm often inspired by playing with my children, taking a shower, taking a walk. And so if you can get your inspiration over here, keep your notebook with you so you can jot things down, and then hyper schedule yourself in 15 to 20-minute blocks, because most of us can guarantee this. Even with the youngest of children, we can get those 15 to 20-minute blocks. We can get stuff done. And it may not be the way we like to work. Like I love to be able to have a 2-hour block of time to do this writing for an article I'm working on, but that's not going to happen right now. So you have to reframe in order to keep your inspiration, your creativity flowing, and also get the actual nuts and bolts writing done. And they may not be simultaneous. Right. And that it may have to be okay right now.
Fair enough. And then the other one is, when our solo time is up, what are some ways that we can transition back into family time without feeling resentful, especially if the writing has been going very well? How do you?
Ooh, so this is going to take mindfulness strategies for yourself. So really give yourself a little buffer so you can transition smoothly. And to use a overused social media term, give yourself permission to put a pin in what you were working in. Put a pin in it. Make sure you're clear about where you're going to pick up when you come back, and then do work to genuinely let it go. Like, really, I was working on this. It was flowing so well. I have to transition in the next 5 minutes. Give yourself a 3-minute transition ritual even, that will help you shift gears that completely. And I speak from experience. Like, I really did write my dissertation between the time my daughter was a newborn and 18 months old. And so I learned this through, a lot of trial and error. Because, it's great to be writing when your newborn is sound asleep, but when they wake up, they actually need you pretty quickly. And so learning those skills in that circumstance, I've been able to help parents who are writers, who are non-writers, who just need help kind of rearranging the way they think about things so that they don't build up anger and resentment towards their children or their family as a whole.
Great. There was a follow-up on the teenager thing.
Yes.
Getting motivated when a high school kid has been told his grades will not fall below his last marking. Like, it just having no external motivation whatsoever, but just how do you get your kid to do a minimum amount of work even when there's no external motivating?
So in this case, I want to know what makes this kid tick. Because I have a 16-year-old who, blew stuff off for a while. But
at the end, outdoorsy,
yeah, right.
Outdoorsy, sporty kid. So how does this, in this environment where you're in the house, in the screens?
So then you say, okay, let's make sure that we help them schedule their time so that they are getting outside and getting work done, and then, doing that over and over again. It's like people who schedule themselves where they literally are taking a break every 45 minutes from their screen, which is a best practice. Every 45 minutes to an hour, we're supposed to get the heck away from our screens. Most of us don't do that. But a teenager like this may benefit from that. Like, you will stay focused for 30 to 45 minutes and get stuff done. And then you get a pass to go run around the yard or play on your skateboard or do jumping jacks on the front porch, whatever works for them. And give them some of the tools and they're good strategies when they move into college and beyond, to be able to say, I need to be outside to function. And so let's not try to have them do 4 hours straight of schoolwork. Let's break it up into smaller chunks where they're rewarding themselves. This is very behaviorist of me, but they're rewarding themselves by giving themselves outside time at least once an hour.
How is it? Okay, this is mom here. How is rewarding somebody different from bribing them?
So bribery implies some underhandedness. And I am not generally a fan of rewards and punishment in education, but we are in unusual times. And with a teenager in particular, I think that knowing how to reward yourself is actually a valuable tool. I would not recommend for those of you with young children that you get into that pattern. My 6-year-old thought he could negotiate with us about this. He said, "So you're going to pay me $1 for getting all my schoolwork done?" I said, "No, you get your schoolwork done because you love learning. And if you want to learn about, earning money, we can talk about doing tasks that would earn you money, but that is not school." And so, kids who are entrepreneurial may be very motivated by things like that. But I, in general, don't like tying rewards and punishment to education. But I think with older kids and teenagers, it's okay to ask them what would keep them motivated. What's their own personal carrot? And that needs to be something they can give themselves.
That sort of covers this question, which is what activities can we do with or for our kids that are not screen time that could occupy them for, let's say 20 minutes to an hour.
Yes. Go outside, do yoga.
You can't go outside in New York. You Florida person, we don't know.
Dance, sing. I have a friend who lives in Brooklyn who sings from her front porch. So there are so many different things that we can do that can get us away from screens. I mean, good old-fashioned board games, teaching them how to play cards. We've had
Perfection. Do you remember Perfection?
Yes.
With the thing that pops up when it's solo games.
Right. My 6-year-old pulled out Sorry from our closet, and he insists one of us play with him at least once a day right now. So
no fighting there. Hilarious. Let me just see if there's any comments that have come in. No, we do not have more extra questions, and we are very, very close to the end of our time. We're so good. Hang on a second. Quick. Yeah, so I am just going to do a little rapidy. And I don't know, I'm going to put up our little, what am I going to put up? I'm going to put up our little Twitters so that hopefully everybody will follow us. As a reminder, this talkback was organized by the nonprofit Parentis, and our core values are balance, professionalism, inclusion, and community. And if your values match ours, and you are the parent of a child of any age, and you are eager to maintain your writing career, then we welcome you to join us. You can find us on Twitter, and we are on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, and all of it is at Parentis. And so please join me in thanking Dr. Michele Tishy for her splendid candor and expertise. And her program is called the HOEP Initiative. That's HOEP. And it can be found on this website. Michele, do you have any final words to the people out here? Our viewers?
Even if you're not interested, thank you all, first of all, and thank you so much for having me. If you're not interested in the program that I'm launching, I also do direct both educational and parent coaching and consulting. So just to throw it out there, I am available for ongoing support if people are interested. And it has been a pleasure to be here, and I thank you so much.
Well, I want to yet again thank everybody for attending, and I want to thank you all for your support of Parentis by just buying your ticket today. You were really helping us out a lot during this pandemic, and I appreciate it. And I also appreciate it that you are donating to all the other nonprofits that are affected by this pandemic. All of us are, struggling and trying to figure out how to transition to online, and I think we're doing a pretty good job. And that's because of you guys. So thanks. Stay safe and be well. And thanks again to Dr. Tishy.
Thank you very much. I wish you all the best.